I still remember the exact moment my world shattered at our family dinner table. My father's face turned cold as stone as he pointed his fork at me. You have to work while your brother enjoys. It's that simple. And if you don't like it, get out. My mother silently nodded beside him, eyes downcast. The betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Tears stung my eyes as I made the decision that would change everything. Great. Then I'll leave, and you can pay your own bills. It's that simple. The clatter of silverware stopped as silence filled our dining room. Growing up in our middle-class home in suburban Ohio, I never realized how abnormal my family was. From the outside, we seemed like the typical American family. My father, Martin, worked as a regional manager at an insurance firm, while my mother, Linda, had retired from teaching elementary school several years ago. My younger brother, Jake, and I were both adults now, me at 27 and him at 25, but the dynamics that shaped our childhood continued to rule our lives. 2 years ago, when I was 25, and finally establishing myself professionally after graduating college, my father had what we thought was a heart attack. It turned out to be severe angina, but the health scare was enough to change our family structure. My parents were struggling financially with medical bills, and I offered to move back home temporarily to help them out. What was meant to be a 3-month arrangement had somehow stretched into 2 years. I had a stable job as an accountant at a local firm, working my way up steadily, while putting most of my salary toward family expenses. Meanwhile, my brother Jake had a very different life trajectory. He had dropped out of college twice, first from State University, where he was on a partial baseball scholarship until he lost it due to poor grades. Then from community college, where he lasted barely a semester before deciding the classroom. Environment stifled his creativity. Since then, Jake had bounced between odd jobs, never staying anywhere longer than a few months. He'd been a bartender, a personal trainer, briefly sold cars, and attempted to start a sports podcast that recorded exactly 3 episodes before he abandoned it. Currently, he was between jobs, but had big plans for a startup he was conceptualizing. The inequality between us wasn't new. Looking back, I could trace it to our earliest memories. When I was 8 and Jake was 6, I received secondhand ice skates while Jake got brand new hockey gear despite showing no particular interest in the sport. In high school, I worked weekends at the local grocery store to save for college while Jake was told to focus solely on baseball. I paid my way through college with a combination of scholarships, student loans, and part-time jobs. Jake's tuition was fully covered by our parents even when his grades were abysmal. Your brother is different, my mother would explain when I questioned the disparity. He's sensitive and needs more support. You're so naturally capable, Cassandra. Being labeled capable became both a blessing and a curse. It meant I was respected, but also that more was expected of me, while less was expected of Jake. This pattern continued into adulthood, with my parents viewing my achievements as the natural result of my capability rather than my hard work, while Jake's failures were seen as temporary setbacks on his path to inevitable greatness. After moving back home, I took over paying most of the household bills. Initially, I contributed about half of the expenses, but gradually that increased as my parents claimed various financial difficulties. I didn't mind helping them, they were my family after all, and I earned a decent salary. But I did wonder where all their money was going, especially since they had downsized to a smaller home after I left for college. The discovery came accidentally on a Sunday afternoon in early spring. My father asked me to help organize his home office, which had become cluttered with papers. While sorting through documents, I found a folder labeled Jake's Ventures that contained financial records. My stomach dropped as I flipped through pages of bank statements and loan documents. My parents had been funding Jake's series of failed business attempts, the podcast, a sports memorabilia online store that never launched, and now apparently a sports analytics consulting company that existed only on expensive letterhead. The total invested was over $60,000 money that had come from their retirement savings. But what truly stunned me was finding the household expense tracking. I had been paying 75% of all bills, not the 50% I had agreed to. The money I thought was helping my parents rebuild their retirement fund was actually going directly to Jake's pipe dreams. I sat back in my father's office chair, the reality crashing down on me. All my sacrifices, delaying my own apartment, postponing my master's degree, putting my personal life on hold, weren't helping my parents at all. I was simply enabling them to keep funding Jake's irresponsibility. I carefully returned the documents exactly as I had found them. I needed time to process what I'd learned and decide what to do next. As I closed the office door behind me, I heard Jake's laughter from the living room where he was watching a football game feet up on the coffee table without a care in the world. After discovering the financial deception, I began paying closer attention to the family dynamics I'd been too busy to notice. Every dinner became an exercise in restraint, as I observed patterns that had been present my entire life but were now glaringly obvious. When this new business takes off, I'm going to pay everyone back. Plus interest, Jake announced one evening, his mouth full of the special low-carb, high-protein meal our mother had prepared just for him. She had informed me earlier that I was on my own for dinner, since she was too tired to cook for everyone. "Of course you will, honey, Mom," said, patting his hand. "We believe in you." Dad nodded in agreement. "Sometimes you have to invest in potential. That's just smart business." I pushed my microwaved leftovers around my plate, biting my tongue. The irony of my father, who was on the verge of financial ruin giving business advice, wasn't lost on me. These scenes repeated with minor variations. Mom ironing Jake's shirts for a job interview while I did my own laundry. Dad bragging to the neighbors about Jake's entrepreneurial spirit while dismissing my recent promotion as just moving up the corporate ladder. Jake borrowing my car without asking, returning it with an empty gas tank. Each incident built upon the last, creating a tower of resentment I could no longer ignore. After 3 weeks of silent observation, I decided to address my concerns privately with my parents. I chose a Sunday afternoon when Jake was out with friends. Sitting at the kitchen table with my parents, I carefully outlined what I had discovered about the household finances and expressed my concern about their retirement security. "I'm worried about you both," I explained, keeping my tone even. "The current arrangement isn't sustainable, and I think we need to establish clearer financial boundaries." My mother immediately teared up. "Are you saying you won't help us anymore after all we've done for you?" "That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm happy to contribute fairly, but I can't be responsible for 75% of the household expenses while also watching you deplete your savings on Jake's projects." My father's face hardened. "Your brother is trying to build something meaningful. Sometimes that takes investment." "I understand that, but—" "No, you don't understand," he interrupted. "Not everyone can be satisfied with a safe, boring job like yours. Jake has vision." The conversation deteriorated from there. My attempts at practical financial planning were met with accusations of jealousy and selfishness. My mother suggested I always resented Jake's creativity. My father implied I was trying to control the family with my money. I left the conversation feeling defeated and increasingly angry. Over the next few days, tensions in the household escalated. My parents whispered when I entered rooms. Jake became overtly hostile, having obviously been told about my attack on his business aspirations. The situation finally boiled over at Thursday's dinner. Jake was describing yet another business idea, an app for amateur athletes to connect with scouts when I asked how development costs would be covered. "Don't start Cassandra," my mother warned. "I'm just asking a practical question," I replied. Jake rolled his eyes. "Not everything is about spreadsheets and ROI. Some people take risks to achieve greatness. And some people take advantage of their family's financial support with nothing to show for it," I countered. My father slammed his hand on the table, making the plates jump. His face flushed as he pointed his fork at me. "You have to work while your brother enjoys. It's that simple. And if you don't like it, get out." The bluntness of his statement, the naked acknowledgement of the inequality I'd felt my entire life, left me breathless. "Martin," my mother murmured, but she placed her hand on his arm in solidarity rather than objection. I looked at my father's angry face, my mother's averted eyes, and my brother's smug expression. 27 years of being the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who sacrificed, crashed down on me all at once. "Great," I said, my voice surprisingly steady despite the tears threatening to spill. "Then I'll leave and you can pay your own bills. It's that simple." The silence that followed was absolute. Jake's smugness evaporated. My father's anger transformed into something like panic. My mother began to cry in earnest. "Cassie, sweetheart," my father said, his tone completely changed. "I didn't mean that. I was just frustrated." "We're family," my mother added between sobs. "We need you." Their rapid backpedaling caught me off guard. My father, who had never apologized to me for anything, reached across the table for my hand. "Please," he said, tears forming in his eyes. "I don't want to lose you. We can work this out." His vulnerability disarmed me. In 27 years, I had never seen my father cry. My mother moved to kneel beside my chair, clutching my arm like I might disappear at any moment. Even Jake looked shaken. "Come on, sis. We all say things we don't mean sometimes." Their united front of rejection had instantly transformed into a united front of retention. Confused and emotionally exhausted, I found myself agreeing to stay, to talk things through, to give our family another chance. "Things will be different," my father promised, wiping his eyes. "You'll see." I wanted desperately to believe him. For 2 weeks following the dinner confrontation, our household transformed into an almost unrecognizable version of itself. Jake started doing dishes without being asked. My father consulted me about household finances. My mother began including me in her meal planning, instead of just cooking for Jake. The changes were so dramatic that I began to hope we had turned a corner as a family. Perhaps the brutal honesty of that dinner conversation had been necessary to break old patterns. I applied for 3 jobs today. Jake announced one evening, showing me his email confirmations. "That's great," I replied, genuinely pleased. "This one at Wilson Marketing looks promising." "Yeah, I figure it's time I got something stable while I develop my business plan more thoroughly." My mother beamed at us from across the living room. "It's so wonderful to see you two supporting each other." Even my father seemed different. He asked about my work with what appeared to be genuine interest and stopped making dismissive comments about my career choice. When I mentioned a challenging project I was managing, he actually said he was proud of me, words I couldn't remember ever hearing from him before. I began to relax and engage more fully with the family. I helped Jake prepare for job interviews, reviewing his resume and conducting mock interviews. I sat with my parents to create a preliminary retirement plan that might help them recover some financial stability. For the first time in years, family meals became pleasant experiences rather than tense obligations. "We should take a weekend trip to Lake Charming next month," my father suggested one Sunday. "Like we used to when you kids were young." I'd like that I said, surprised by his initiative. Jake nodded enthusiastically. "Remember how we used to have cannonball competitions off the dock? And Mom would pack those huge picnic baskets," I added, smiling at the memory. "I still have the recipe for those oatmeal cookies you both loved," Mom said. In these moments, I could almost believe we were healing, becoming the family I had always wished we could be. Then came the call that shattered the illusion. I was working from home that Tuesday when the house phone rang. Since I was the only one home, I answered it. "Is Martin Sanders available?" a professional-sounding woman asked. "He's not here right now. Can I take a message?" "This is Diane Roberts from First Capital Bank. I'm calling about the second mortgage application. We need one additional document to complete the process." I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. "Second mortgage." "Yes, the application submitted last week. Could you ask Mr. Sanders to call me back regarding the proof of income requirement?" I took down her information mechanically, my mind racing. After hanging up, I sat motionless at the kitchen table. My parents hadn't mentioned anything about a second mortgage. Given their financial situation, taking on more debt seemed catastrophically unwise. When my mother returned from grocery shopping an hour later, I helped her unpack the bags before casually mentioning the call. Someone named Diane from First Capital Bank called about Dad's second mortgage application. She said they need additional documentation. The carton of eggs my mother was holding slipped from her fingers, crashing to the floor. Yellow and clear liquid spread across the tile fragments of shell, scattered like confetti. "Mom, what's wrong?" She didn't answer immediately, staring at the mess as if it represented something much larger. Then she sank into a kitchen chair, her face pale. "We weren't going to tell you," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "Tell me what?" "We're in trouble, Cassandra. Serious financial trouble." Over the next 30 minutes, my mother revealed the extent of their financial disaster. My parents were not just depleting their retirement to fund Jake's ventures. They were on the verge of bankruptcy. The medical bills from my father's cardiac care 2 years ago had been much higher than they had told me. They had maxed out 3 credit cards and taken personal loans from 2 different banks. The second mortgage was a desperate attempt to consolidate their debt. But why, I asked, still struggling to comprehend. Why take on more debt instead of cutting expenses? My mother's eyes filled with tears. Jake's new business. Your father is convinced it will succeed where the others failed. He just needs proper funding to get it launched. The sports app Mom Jake doesn't know the first thing about app development. He'd need to hire programmers, designers, marketing that costs hundreds of thousands of dollars. Your father says we just need to provide seed money to attract investors. I closed my eyes, trying to process the magnitude of their delusion. How much have you given him for this app? She hesitated before answering. $42,000 so far. $42,000? For what? He hired a consultant to develop the business plan. And there were legal fees for setting up the company. And he needed a new laptop with special software. Each item she listed was an unnecessary expense or outright waste of money. The consultant was likely someone equally unqualified who had recognized an easy mark. The legal fees could have been avoided with basic online business registration. The special software was probably standard productivity tools with a markup. And now you can't make the mortgage payment, I concluded. My mother nodded miserably. We were counting on your contribution for the next payment. We thought things would turn around by now. The betrayal hit me anew. All the changes in family dynamics over the past 2 weeks, my father's newfound respect, my mother's inclusiveness, even Jake's job search had been a performance designed to keep me complacent, so I would continue financially, supporting the household while they funneled money to Jake's doomed venture. Does Jake know how bad things are? I asked. We've tried to protect him from the financial details. He's sensitive, you know that. The familiar excuse ignited my anger. He's 25 years old. He's not a child who needs protection. He's an adult who needs responsibility. Please don't tell him, my mother begged. Your father would be devastated if Jake felt burdened by this. I stood up, needing physical distance. I'm not keeping this secret, Mom. This affects all of us. She reached for my hand, desperation in her eyes. We're family. We need to support each other. Support goes both ways, I replied, pulling away. And right now it's only flowing in one direction. I left her sitting at the kitchen table surrounded by broken eggs, a fitting metaphor for our family's shattered finances and my broken trust. After learning the true extent of my family's financial disaster, I spent a sleepless night weighing my options. By morning, I had formulated a plan that would require significant changes from everyone but might save my parents from bankruptcy. I called a family meeting for that evening, setting up the dining room with printouts of financial statements, debt calculations, and a month-by-month recovery plan. When my family gathered, their expressions ranged from curiosity, Jake, to nervousness, my mother, to outright hostility, my father. What's all this? My father demanded, gesturing at the papers. This is reality, I replied calmly, and a potential way forward. Over the next hour, I laid out the complete financial situation in unsparing detail. I showed them the total debt, the monthly shortfall, and the unsustainability of their current path. My father tried to interrupt several times, but I held firm. Please let me finish. You need to understand where things stand before we discuss solutions. When I finally presented my recovery plan, the room fell silent. The plan required immediate dramatic changes, selling one of their cars, cutting all non-essential expenses, my father taking on part-time work. Despite his semi-retirement, my mother returning to substitute teaching, and most significantly, Jake getting a full-time job and contributing to household expenses. This is ridiculous, my father eventually sputtered. You're asking us to completely upend our lives because of a temporary cash flow problem. Temporary, I echoed. You're $200,000 in debt with declining income and increasing expenses. That's not temporary, that's a crisis. My mother looked shell-shocked. Maybe Cassandra has a point, Martin. Jake had been unusually quiet, staring at the financial statements with a furrowed brow. I had no idea things were this bad, he finally said. Why didn't you tell me? We didn't want to worry you, my mother said quickly. I resisted the urge to roll my eyes. The point is, we need a family solution. Everyone needs to contribute. To my surprise, Jake nodded. I can get a job. I've actually got an interview tomorrow at Wilson Marketing. My father looked betrayed. But your business, your dreams, they can wait, Jake said, showing more maturity than I had expected. This is more important right now. With Jake's unexpected support, My parents reluctantly agreed to try my plan. My mother committed to calling her old school about substitute positions. My father agreed to reduce expenses, though he balked at the idea of part-time work. We'll revisit that if necessary, I conceded, not wanting to push too hard all at once. For 3 days, it seemed like we might be turning a corner. Jake went to his interview and was offered an entry-level position in Wilson Marketing's social media department. My mother arranged to start substitute teaching the following week. My father grudgingly canceled his golf club membership. Then, Jake dropped his bombshell at dinner. I quit the Wilson job, he announced casually, as if discussing a change in weather. My fork clattered against my plate. You what? It wasn't right for me. The work was boring and the pay was insulting. You were there for 3 days, I said incredulously. He shrugged. Long enough to know it wasn't utilizing my talents. Besides, I got great news today. A potential investor is interested in the sports app. My father immediately perked up. That's wonderful. Who is it? As Jake described a connection he'd made at a bar who claimed to know venture capitalists, I watched our family recovery plan crumble before my eyes. This is exactly what we've been waiting for, my father said, excitement overtaking his reason. I knew your ideas would attract the right attention eventually. We should celebrate, my mother suggested, already rising to open a bottle of wine we couldn't afford. Wait, I interjected. Let's think about this rationally. Jake, did this person actually commit any money? Do they have a track record of successful investments? Did you sign any paperwork? Jake's expression soured. Not everything needs to be analyzed to death, Cassandra. Sometimes you have to go with your gut in business. Your gut doesn't pay the mortgage, I replied. My father slammed his hand on the table. That's enough. This is exactly the kind of opportunity we've been supporting Jake to find. Unlike you with your safe, boring career path, your brother is willing to take risks for extraordinary rewards. Those risks are bankrupting this family. Successful families make sacrifices, my father retorted, his voice rising. As the responsible one, you need to carry more of the burden while Jake pursues his dreams. And why am I the responsible one? I demanded. Why does Jake get endless support while I'm expected to work and sacrifice? Because that's how this family functions, my father shouted. You have to work while your brother enjoys. It's that simple. And if you don't like it, get out. The ultimatum hung in the air exactly as it had before. My mother placed her hand on my father's arm, but nodded in agreement. We've always known you were the strong one, Cassie. Jake needs more nurturing. I can't believe we're back here again, I said quietly. Nothing has changed. You're being selfish, my father accused. Family means supporting each other. It should mean supporting each other equally. My mother's face crumpled. You don't understand. Because. She looked at my father with panic in her eyes. Because what, Mom? Tell her Linda, my father said coldly. Maybe then she'll understand her place in this family. My mother began to cry, her words coming between sobs. Martin isn't. He isn't your biological father, Cassandra. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. I sat back in my chair, the room suddenly spinning around me. What? I was in a relationship before I met Martin. It ended badly, and then I discovered I was pregnant with you. Martin and I started dating when you were 3 months old. He agreed to raise you as his own. Memories cascaded through my mind, a lifetime of subtle rejections, of being held to different standards, of never quite measuring up in my father's eyes. All of it suddenly made terrible sense. Who is my real father? I asked. His name was Thomas Greer. He moved to California before you were born. We haven't had any contact since then. Does Jake know? My mother shook her head. We never saw the need to tell him. I looked at the man I had called father my entire life, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. So I've spent 27 years trying to earn the approval of someone who never considered me his daughter. I raised you, didn't I? He snapped defensively. Put food on your table, clothes on your back. Most men wouldn't have taken on another man's child. His words revealed everything about how he viewed me, not as his daughter, but as a burden he had reluctantly accepted. And you've been making me pay for that generosity my entire life, I realized aloud. While Jake, your real child, gets everything handed to him. No one contradicted me. The truth finally spoke and filled the room like poison gas. I stood up slowly. I need some air. Neither of my parents tried to stop me as I walked out the front door into the cool evening air, my entire identity fracturing around me. After the revelation about my paternity, I spent the night at a hotel, unable to face returning to my parents' house. The next morning, I called in sick to work and began researching apartments. If I was going to make a clean break, I needed to move quickly before my resolve weakened. By that afternoon, I had toured 3 apartments and applied for the one I liked best. A 1-bedroom unit in a secure building 20 minutes from my office. The property manager, seeing my excellent credit score and steady income, approved my application on the spot. I could move in the following week. Next, I visited my bank to ensure my finances were completely separated from my parents. Though I had my own accounts, I discovered I was still listed as a joint account holder on one of their checking accounts, a remnant from college when they needed to transfer money for expenses. I removed my name immediately. As I drove back to my parents' house to collect some essential belongings, I felt a strange combination of grief and liberation. The family I thought I had was an illusion, but acknowledging that truth was oddly freeing. My mother was waiting when I arrived, her eyes red from crying. "Where have you been? We've been worried sick." I needed time to process everything, I replied, moving past her toward my bedroom. She followed me, watching as I pulled out a suitcase. "What are you doing?" "Packing what I need for now. I found an apartment." "You're really leaving?" Her voice cracked. "Cassandra, please, we can work this out." "There's nothing to work out, Mom. You and Da," I caught myself. "You and Martin have made the family dynamic perfectly clear. I'm the outsider, the one who works and pays bills while Jake gets everything." "That's not true. We love you both equally." I paused in my packing to look at her directly. "When have you ever treated us equally?" "Name one time." "Just one, when Jake was held to the same standards as me." She opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to provide an example. "That's what I thought," I said, returning to my packing. "Your father is devastated," she tried again. "He never meant for you to find out this way. He never meant for me to find out at all," I corrected. "And he's not my father. You both made that abundantly clear last night." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "He raised you as his own." "No, he didn't. He raised me as his responsibility, his burden. There's a difference." As I continued packing, my mother cycled through different tactics: guilt, anger, pleading. When none worked, she finally resorted to emotional manipulation. "If you leave, it will destroy this family. Is that what you want?" I zipped my suitcase closed. "This family was destroyed long before I decided to leave. You just didn't notice because Jake and I were playing the roles you assigned us." I carried my suitcase to the car, planning to return for the rest of my belongings once I had keys to my new apartment. As I was loading it into my trunk, Jake pulled into the driveway. He got out of his car and approached me cautiously. "So you're really doing it," he said. "You're leaving." "Yes." He kicked at a pebble on the driveway. "They told me. About you not being Dad's biological kid." I tensed, waiting for him to use this information as another weapon against me. "That's messed up," he continued. "That they kept it from you all these years." His unexpected empathy caught me off guard. "Yes, it is. And I get it now," he said, looking uncomfortable. "Why they always treated us differently. It wasn't fair to you." I leaned against my car, studying my brother's face. Despite everything, he was still my brother, the little boy who had followed me around the neighborhood, who had cried when I left for college, who could still make me laugh with his terrible impressions of our high school teachers. "It wasn't fair to either of us, Jake. They made you dependent and me responsible. Neither of us got to just be ourselves." He nodded slowly. "I always felt like I couldn't measure up to you. You were so good at everything: school, sports, making friends. Dad would compare us and I always came up short. The only advantage I had was being his real kid. I never knew that, I admitted. From my perspective, you got everything handed to you while I had to work for scraps of approval. Screwed up, right?" A wry smile crossed his face. They managed to make both of us feel inadequate in completely opposite ways. We stood in silence for a moment, 25 years of complicated sibling dynamics hanging between us. "Where will you go?" he finally asked. "I found an apartment closer to work. I move in next week." He nodded. "They're freaking out in there. Mom's been crying all day, and Dad keeps checking his phone like he expects you to call and apologize. I'm not the one who should be apologizing. I know. He hesitated, then added, I'm sorry, though. For my part in all this, I've been selfish. His apology, the first genuine one I could remember receiving from any family member, loosened something tight in my chest. Thank you for saying that. We were interrupted by commotion from the house. Our father burst through the front door, face pale and clutching his chest. Martin. Our mother followed close behind, panic in her voice. Cassandra, call an ambulance. Your father's having chest pains. The next hour passed in a blur of paramedic sirens and the sterile corridors of the emergency room. My mother clung to my arm in the waiting room while Jake paced nervously. Despite everything, the prospect of Martin dying twisted my stomach into knots. When the doctor finally approached us, his expression was reassuring. Mr. Sanders is stable. The tests show no evidence of a heart attack. Thank God, my mother whispered. What caused the chest pains? I asked. Most likely anxiety. His heart shows no new damage compared to his previous tests. My mother and Jake went in to see him while I stayed behind, using the opportunity to speak privately with the doctor. My father had what we thought was a heart attack 2 years ago. Could you tell me more about his condition? The doctor reviewed the chart. According to his records, Mr. Sanders experienced angina, which can certainly be frightening, but isn't the same as a myocardial infarction, what we commonly call a heart attack. How serious is his condition? The doctor hesitated. Miss Sanders, are you listed as a medical proxy for your father? No, just my mother. He nodded. Then I should limit what I share about his specific case. However, speaking generally, the type of angina your father experiences is typically manageable with medication and lifestyle changes. Many patients lead normal lives with minimal restrictions. Something in his tone made me press further. Are you suggesting my father has been exaggerating his condition? The doctor chose his words carefully. I can only say that some patients may perceive their symptoms as more severe than clinical findings would suggest, particularly if there are psychological factors like anxiety or stress. The implications sank in slowly. For 2 years, I had arranged my life around helping my seriously ill father. I had moved home, postponed my own goals, and taken on financial responsibility for the family, all based on a health crisis that might have been largely manufactured. As I walked toward my father's hospital room, I felt a cold clarity descend. When I entered, he was sitting up in bed, looking remarkably recovered, for someone who had been clutching his chest in apparent agony just hours before. Cassie, he said, reaching for my hand. You stayed. I remained just beyond his reach. The doctor says you're going to be fine. This time, he said ominously. But these episodes are unpredictable. The stress of you leaving certainly didn't help. Our eyes met, and for the first time I saw the manipulation for what it was. I'm still leaving, I said quietly. My decision hasn't changed. His face hardened. After this, you'd abandon your family when I could have died. But you weren't dying. The doctor said it was anxiety. What do doctors know? I feel what I feel. My mother gasped. Cassandra, how can you be so cold? I looked between them, my father, using his health to control the family, my mother enabling his behavior, both of them expecting me to fall back in line out of guilt and obligation. I'll help you get home from the hospital, I said. Then I'm going to a hotel until my apartment is ready. My decision is final. As I walked out of the room, I heard my father call after me, his voice a mixture of anger and desperation. But for once, I kept walking, my resolve stronger than my guilt. True to my word, I helped get my father settled at home after his hospital release, then checked into an extended stay hotel until my apartment was ready. The first few days of separation from my family were both difficult and liberating. I focused on my work, putting in extra hours and channeling my emotional energy into productivity. My boss, Elaine, noticed the change in my demeanor. Everything okay, Cassandra? You seem intense lately. After 2 years of keeping my family situation private, I found myself wanting to confide in someone who might understand. Over lunch in her office, I shared the condensed version of recent events, the financial exploitation, the paternity revelation, my decision to leave. To my surprise, Elaine's eyes filled with tears as I spoke. When I finished, she said I could have told that exact same story 20 years ago. Really? She nodded. My situation was with my mother and sister. Same dynamic, I was the responsible one. My sister was the one who needed extra support. I paid my mother's mortgage for 4 years before I realized they were using me. What did you do? I asked, desperate for guidance from someone who had walked this path before. I left, just like you're doing. It was the hardest and best decision I ever made. She smiled sadly. They didn't speak to me for 2 years. Then my sister had a baby, and suddenly they needed me again. We have a relationship now, but with very firm boundaries. Her story gave me hope that I wasn't destroying my family by standing up for myself, just redefining it on healthier terms. Meanwhile, my extended family had begun to react to my departure. My mother had apparently shared her version of events that I had selfishly abandoned them during a health crisis. Calls and text messages arrived from aunts, uncles, and cousins, most expressing disappointment in my heartless behavior. My Aunt Sarah's message hurt the most. She had always been kind to me, often the only adult who seemed to notice the disparity in how Jake and I were treated. Her text read, "I thought better of you, Cassandra. Family should come first, especially when your father is ill." I tried calling her to explain my side, but she didn't answer. I left a voicemail asking her to hear me out, before judging, but received no response. The narrative my parents had created portrayed me as the villain, while carefully omitting the years of financial exploitation and emotional manipulation. It was easier for the extended family to believe I was selfish than to accept that the Martin and Linda they thought they knew could behave so dysfunctionally. By the time I moved into my new apartment a week later, only my brother was still in regular contact with me. Jake texted daily, sometimes with substantive conversations about our family dynamics, other times with memes or random observations. Despite our complicated history, I found myself grateful for his continued presence in my life. The day I fully moved out of my parents' house was tense but uneventful. I arrived mid-morning when I knew my father would be at his weekly golf game. His doctor recommended stress relief that he couldn't afford but wouldn't give up. My mother watched silently, tears streaming down her face as I packed the remainder of my belongings. "This doesn't have to be forever," I told her as I prepared to leave. "But things need to change before I can be part of this family again." She nodded but said nothing, her expression a mixture of sadness and resentment. My new apartment quickly became my sanctuary. It was smaller than my room at my parents' house, but it was mine, a space where I could exist without constant guilt or obligation. I decorated it minimally, but comfortably, focusing on creating a peaceful environment. At work, I channeled my emotional turmoil into ambition. I volunteered for challenging projects, put in extra hours, and sought mentorship from senior colleagues. My efforts didn't go unnoticed. 3 weeks after moving out, I was called into a meeting with Elaine and the department director. "We've been impressed with your performance," the director said, "particularly your work on the Westfield audit. We'd like to offer you a promotion to senior accountant." The promotion came with a significant salary increase and more responsibility. After years of feeling undervalued at home, the professional recognition was powerfully affirming. As I settled into my new life and role, I began to experience what true independence felt like. I joined a local hiking group, reconnected with college friends I had lost touch with after moving home, and even went on a few dates, something I hadn't prioritized while living with my parents. For nearly a month, my contact with my parents was limited to brief text messages checking on my father's health. I was beginning to think we might establish a distant but civil relationship when the unexpected happened. I was at work presenting financial projections to a client when my phone began vibrating continuously in my pocket. When I finally excused myself to check it, I had 7 missed calls from my father and 3 from my mother, plus multiple text messages saying, "Call immediately." Fearing another health crisis, I stepped outside and called my father. "What's going on? Is everyone okay?" "You need to explain this," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "Right now." "Explain what?" "The credit card statements that just arrived. There are accounts in your name with balances over $20,000. Accounts we know nothing about." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about? I don't have any credit cards I haven't told you about. These statements came to our house addressed to you. 3 different cards, all maxed out." A cold realization dawned on me. I didn't open those accounts. Then who did your name is on them? I took a deep breath. I think you know exactly who opened them, Dad. The same people who have been using my financial responsibility to enable Jake's irresponsibility for years. His voice rose to a shout. Are you accusing us of identity theft? If the credit cards fit, I replied, surprised by my own calm. How dare you, after everything we've done for you? I'm coming over tonight, I said. We need to talk about this in person, and I suggest you have those statements ready. After ending the call, I sat on a bench outside my office building, trying to process what had happened. My parents had apparently used my personal information to open credit accounts in my name, potentially destroying my credit score and financial future. The betrayal was staggering, crossing the line from emotional manipulation into potential criminal activity. That evening, I drove to my parents' house with a mixture of dread and determination. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a new car parked in front, a late-model luxury SUV that surely cost more than they could afford. My mother answered the door, her expression guarded. We need to discuss this calmly, she said. My father waited in the living room, the credit card statements spread across the coffee table. Jake was notably absent. Where did this car come from? I asked, first gesturing toward the driveway. My parents exchanged looks. Jake needed reliable transportation for his new job interviews, my father replied defensively. So you bought him a $50,000 SUV while you're on the verge of bankruptcy with credit cards in my name. It's not what you think, my mother began. I picked up one of the statements. The card had been opened 6 months ago, well before I discovered their financial deception, but after I had moved home to help them. The purchases were a mixture of regular household expenses, Jake's business supplies, and luxury items like golf equipment and designer clothes. This is identity theft, I said quietly. It's a criminal offense. My father's face flushed. We were going to tell you. These were emergency measures when our own credit was maxed out. We intended to pay them off before you ever knew. With what money I demanded. You're already drowning in debt. You can't afford your existing payments, let alone $20,000 more. Your brother's business is about to take off, he insisted. The investor meeting is next week. I shook my head in disbelief. After everything that had happened, they were still clinging to the fantasy of Jake's business success. I'm meeting with a lawyer tomorrow, I said. I have 2 options. Report this as identity theft, which would likely result in criminal charges against both of you, or work out a formal repayment plan that you'll be legally obligated to follow. You would report your own parents to the police, my mother gasped. You stole my identity, I countered. What would you have me do? My father stood up, looming over me. I won't be threatened in my own home. After everything we've done for you. What exactly have you done for me? I interrupted, rising to meet his gaze. Besides using me financially, lying to me about my paternity for 27 years, and now committing fraud in my name, his hand rose as if to strike me, then dropped to his side. In that moment, any lingering doubt about my decision to separate from my family vanished. The man before me wasn't someone who cared about my well-being. He was someone who saw me as a resource to be exploited, and now a threat to be intimidated. I'll give you 24 hours to decide, I said, moving toward the door. Either agree to a formal, legally binding repayment plan, or I file police reports for identity theft tomorrow afternoon. As I walked out the door, my father called after me. You'll regret this, Cassandra. No daughter treats her parents this way. I turned back one last time. You're right about one thing, I'm not your daughter. You made that perfectly clear. After consulting with a lawyer the next morning, I had a clear understanding of my options. Identity theft was a serious crime with potential jail time, but proving my parents had acted without my consent might be difficult given our previously intertwined finances. The lawyer, Natalie Warren, suggested a legally binding repayment agreement as the best solution. It protects your credit score, creates a structured path for them to repay the debt, and doesn't involve criminal charges against your family. And if they don't follow through with payments, I asked, then we can pursue more serious legal action with documentation of the agreement already in place. I decided to give my parents this one chance to make things right. I drafted the agreement with Natalie's help, creating a realistic but strict repayment schedule over 3 years. The document included consequences for missed payments and required my parents to attend financial counseling. I texted my father I have the paperwork ready. I'll bring it over at 6 tonight. This is your opportunity to fix this without legal charges. His reply was terse, "We'll be here." When I arrived that evening, I was surprised to find not just my parents waiting, but also Jake. He looked nervous, but determined. "I asked to be here," he explained. "This involves me too." My father sat stone-faced at the dining table, while my mother fidgeted beside him. I laid out the agreement and explained the terms. "This is extortion," my father muttered. "This is mercy," I corrected. I could have gone directly to the police. "We can't afford these payments," my mother protested. "Not on our current income." "Then you'll need to make changes. Sell the new SUV. Dad can get a part-time job. Mom can substitute teach more days per week." "And what about Jake's business?" my father demanded. Before I could respond, Jake spoke up. "There is no business, Dad. Not anymore." All three of us turned to look at him. "What do you mean?" my father asked. Jake took a deep breath. "I met with that investor yesterday. He looked at my business plan and said it wasn't viable. Not even close." He looked down at his hands. He was right. "I've been kidding myself and letting you kid yourselves for years." My father's face crumpled. "But your potential—" "My potential isn't in being an entrepreneur," Jake interrupted. "At least not now. Maybe someday, but I need to learn a lot more first." He turned to me. "Cassandra, I got a real job. Like a regular 9-to-5 position with benefits. I start Monday." "That's great," I said, genuinely happy for him. "Where?" "Wilson Marketing again. They had another opening. It's entry-level, but it's steady. And I'm moving out of Mom and Dad's house. I found a roommate situation I can afford on my new salary." The transformation in my brother amazed me. Somehow, in the weeks since I'd left, he had begun to grow up. "I'll be contributing to the repayment plan too," he added. "I talked to Cassandra's lawyer this morning. I'm not legally responsible since I didn't open the cards, but morally. A lot of that money was spent on me." My parents looked shell-shocked, as if they couldn't comprehend that both their children were now setting boundaries. My father finally spoke, his voice subdued. "So this is it. Both of you are leaving us." "We're not leaving you," I said. "We're asking you to relate to us as adults, not as extensions of yourselves." My mother began to cry softly. "We never meant for things to get so out of control. We just wanted to help Jake succeed." "I know," I acknowledged, "but your help was hurting both of us in different ways." After much discussion and a few more emotional outbursts, my parents signed the agreement. It was just a first step, but an important one toward potential healing. In the weeks that followed, significant changes unfolded. True to his word, Jake started his marketing job and moved into an apartment with 2 roommates. He contributed 20% of his salary toward the repayment plan. My father, facing financial reality without Jake's hypothetical business success, to cling to found part-time consulting work with his former company. My mother increased her substitute teaching to 3 days a week. They sold the SUV and downsized to a more modest used car. Our relationships evolved gradually. Jake and I grew closer, often meeting for coffee to talk about our new independent lives. My mother made tentative efforts to rebuild trust, though she still occasionally slipped into guilt-inducing comments that I was learning to recognize and deflect. My father was the slowest to change. His resentment at the new family dynamic was palpable, but the financial agreement gave me leverage to maintain boundaries. When he made manipulative comments about his health or my obligations, I simply reminded him of our legal arrangement. 3 months after moving out, I received an unexpected visitor at my apartment. My Aunt Sarah stood at my door looking apologetic. "I should have called first," she said hesitantly. "It's fine. Come in." Over tea, she explained why she had come. "I spoke with Jake yesterday. He told me everything, the financial situation, the identity theft, even about Martin not being your biological father." She shook her head sadly. "I had no idea things were so dysfunctional. I owe you an apology for judging without knowing the full story." Her validation meant more than I could express. Finally, someone from the family acknowledged what I had experienced. "Thank you," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "That means a lot." She reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "You did the right thing, Cassandra. Setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary." With Sarah's support, I gradually reconnected with other extended family members, sharing my perspective on what had happened. Most were shocked by the full story, especially the identity theft. While some remained loyal to my parents' narrative, others began to understand my position. 6 months after moving out, my mother asked if we could meet privately. Over lunch at a neutral restaurant, she handed me an envelope. "What's this?" I asked. "Information about Thomas Greer, your biological father. His last known address, phone number, social media accounts. I should have given this to you years ago." I stared at the envelope, a rush of complicated emotions washing over me. "Why now?" "Because you deserve to know where you come from," she said simply. "And because I'm trying to do better." I didn't immediately reach out to Thomas Greer. I needed time to process the possibility of connecting with my biological father. But having the information felt like reclaiming a piece of my identity that had been withheld. By the 1-year anniversary of my departure from my parents' house, our family had transformed in ways I never could have predicted. Jake had received a promotion at work and was taking night classes in marketing. My parents had made every scheduled repayment and were slowly rebuilding their finances. I had been promoted again and was considering buying a small condo. The most significant change, however, was in our family dynamic. The old patterns of Jake being enabled and me being exploited had been disrupted, allowing new, healthier relationships to form. We weren't a perfect family, far from it, but we were no longer trapped in toxic roles assigned to us in childhood. When Jake suggested a family dinner to celebrate his 1-year work anniversary, I agreed with only minimal apprehension. As I entered the restaurant and saw my family waiting, I recognized genuine smiles rather than manipulative ones. During dinner, my father raised his glass. To Jake for his promotion and hard work this past year. After we all clinked glasses, Jake added, "And to Cassandra, without whom I might still be chasing impossible dreams instead of building real ones." My father hesitated, then nodded in agreement. To Cassandra, he echoed, meeting my eyes with what appeared to be genuine respect for perhaps the first time. As I drove home that night, I reflected on the painful journey that had brought us to this point. Standing up for myself had been the hardest decision I'd ever made, but also the most necessary, not just for me, but for everyone. By refusing to enable toxic patterns, I had forced growth that might never have happened otherwise. I realized that my worth wasn't defined by how much I sacrificed for others, and that sometimes true love means setting firm boundaries. The family I had now, both biological and chosen, was built on mutual respect rather than obligation or guilt. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that made all the difference. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who took you for granted? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is say enough to those we love most. If this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that standing up for themselves isn't selfish, it's necessary for everyone's growth. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you the courage to define your own worth on your terms, not someone else's expectations.